The beeping was erratic. Fast, slowing, then fast again. Laura Bennett gripped Jack's hand harder, her knuckles white. Her other hand trembled on the railing of the ICU bed. Jack Monroe lay unconscious, pale as the hospital sheets beneath him, with a sheen of sweat on his forehead and a breathing mask covering his mouth and nose. Tubes and wires connected his body to machines she didn't understand, one for blood pressure, another for fluids, one beeping every time his heart remembered to beat. Nurses moved quickly, not panicking, but with a speed that told Laura they'd seen this before, and it wasn't good. BP's dropping, systolic down to 72. Start norepinephrine, hang another liter wide open. Call Dr. Pierce. Now. Someone was calling Jack's name loudly, trying to stir him. He didn't move. Laura tried not to scream. She bit her lip hard until she tasted blood, her eyes fixed on the digital numbers blinking beside Jack's bed. Just 48 hours earlier, they were in their small bathroom at home. Jack was sitting on a wooden stool in front of the mirror, shirtless. Laura had gloves on, gauze laid out on the counter, antiseptic in a bottle by the sink. She remembered the way the skin on Jack's upper back had stretched, tight, shiny, the size of a softball between his shoulder blades. She remembered thinking, "This looks wrong," and then he said, "Just do it," and she pressed her fingers in from both sides. The release had been violent. It shot out in a thick, wet stream, off-white and chunky, splattering the mirror, the sink, her gloves, the floor. It didn't stop for a full minute. At first they were both shocked, even amazed. Jack had laughed, wincing, and said, "That's gotta be a world record." They thought it was over. It wasn't. Back in the ICU, the attending physician, Dr. Alan Pierce, walked in briskly, reading from a tablet. Laura stood up, shaking. Is he going to be okay?" Dr. Pierce looked at her, calm but serious. "We're working on stabilizing him. His blood pressure is dangerously low. His body is in septic shock from an aggressive soft tissue infection. We've started broad-spectrum 4 antibiotics and fluids, but he may need vasopressors and surgical intervention tonight." Laura's knees nearly buckled. "From the cyst?" Dr. Pierce nodded. "Yes, from the attempted drainage at home." She looked at Jack. His lips were slightly blue at the edges. Dr. Pierce stepped closer, his voice quieter. "We see this more than you'd think. People delay care because of cost, fear, thinking it's nothing. But when you rupture a cyst that size, especially one that's been growing for years, you're not just releasing fluid, you're releasing bacteria into surrounding tissue, sometimes into the bloodstream. And when that happens," he glanced at the monitor, "we get this." Laura felt sick. She wanted to go back in time, tell Jack not to wait, tell herself not to press. But none of that would change the fact that Jack was fighting for his life. She reached for his hand again, whispering, "Please, just hang on." And then, through the storm of machines and voices and sterile chaos, came the voice in her head, the one that had haunted her since the bathroom. "We thought we were saving money. We thought we were being smart. But that one decision, to do it ourselves, nearly killed him." It had started with a bump, just a bump, but the cost of waiting was almost everything. 3 years earlier, Jack Monroe was standing shirtless in front of the bathroom mirror, toweling off after a hot shower. Laura leaned against the doorframe, sipping her morning coffee and scrolling through her phone. It was a quiet Sunday, the kind of ordinary morning that never seems important until it becomes the before. "Hey," she said, tilting her head. "What's that on your back?" Jack glanced over his shoulder in the mirror, twisting slightly. "What? Turn around." He did, and Laura walked over, brushing her hand over the space between his shoulder blades. "There's a bump here," she said, pressing gently. "Small, but kind of firm." Jack shrugged. "Probably just a pimple, or an ingrown hair. Feels fine." Laura frowned. "You should keep an eye on it." He nodded, already drying his hair with the towel. "Sure, if it starts growing teeth, I'll let you know." They laughed. Then they moved on. That small bump was about the size of a marble, hard to see, easy to ignore, especially for Jack, who couldn't even reach it. In the weeks that followed, neither of them thought much of it. It didn't hurt, it didn't change. Life was busy. Jack was working full-time as a construction site supervisor in Aurora, Colorado, overseeing a long-term municipal renovation project. Long hours, high stress, a lot of physical movement. He was good at what he did, respected by the crews he managed, and known for his no-nonsense attitude. Laura, meanwhile, worked remotely as an HR associate for a tech startup based in Austin. She managed onboarding and employee benefits from her laptop, balancing Zoom calls with laundry and cooking dinner. They weren't wealthy, but they had a rhythm. Rent was manageable, groceries were getting expensive, but they made it work. They'd talked about getting married. Someday. When the timing was right. When they could afford it. As the months went on, the bumps slowly grew. Not fast, so gradually it was almost unnoticeable. From a marble to a grape, then to a small egg. Laura would occasionally notice it when Jack took his shirt off. Once or twice she asked, "Is that thing getting bigger?" Jack would roll his eyes, laugh it off. "I'm not dying," he said. "It's just a cyst or something. Not a big deal." But it was getting bigger, and the skin over it was changing. It was tight, smooth, slightly shiny. One evening, as Jack sat down on the couch, he winced. Laura noticed. "What was that?" "Nothing. Just sat weird. Your back?" "Yeah. A little sore. That lump?" He hesitated. "Maybe." They looked at each other for a moment. Laura put her phone down. "Jack, you need to see someone about it." Jack exhaled, rubbing his temples. "I know, but it's not hurting all the time. I mean, what are they going to say? Yep, you've got a lump. That'll be $300, thanks." "It's not about the money. It kind of is." His voice was tired. "You remember when I had that sore throat last year? Went to urgent care, they ran a strep test and gave me a Tylenol. That bill was $1,100. After insurance." Laura didn't argue. She remembered. "I don't have PTO," Jack added. "I miss a day, I lose a day's pay. And we've got the car registration, rent going up next month. You know how it is." "I do," she said quietly. "But I also know ignoring it won't make it go away." Jack rubbed the back of his neck. "I'll get it checked when the job wraps up next month." He didn't. A few more months passed. The job didn't wrap. Another client came in with a rush timeline, and Jack, being reliable, took it on. The lump became a background character in their lives, an unspoken presence that grew just a little more with each passing season. Summer turned to fall, fall to winter. Laura noticed Jack started wearing looser shirts. He avoided taking them off around friends. He stopped going to the pool when invited. Once, at a barbecue, someone slapped him on the back, and he flinched so hard, the guy thought he'd been stung by a bee. That night, Laura brought it up again. "Babe, this thing isn't going away, and it's clearly bothering you." Jack sighed. "I'll see a doctor, just not right now." "Why not now?" He hesitated. "Because I'm embarrassed." Laura softened. "Jack, I let it go for too long. Now it's huge. They're going to cut it open or something. I don't want to deal with that. It's okay to be scared." "I'm not scared." He paused. "I'm ashamed." Laura moved closer, wrapping her arms around him from behind. "I love you. This isn't shameful. But if it's growing or painful or changing, we can't ignore it anymore." Jack nodded slowly. But nothing changed. By the 2-year mark, the lump was the size of a tangerine. Laura looked up medical articles online. Terms like epidermoid cyst and sebaceous cyst popped up. She read about how most were harmless but could become infected, about the importance of early removal, about the risks of rupture and internal tissue damage. She sent Jack a few links. He didn't click them. He kept working, kept hiding it. And every time she brought it up, he said the same thing: soon. Eventually, the lump grew to the size of a baseball, then a softball. It distorted the line of his shoulders. In the mirror, you could see the curve of it beneath his shirt. The skin was stretched thin. A tiny dark dot appeared near the center, like a clogged pore. Laura pressed lightly once, curious, and Jack jerked away. "Don't touch it," he said sharply. "Sorry, it's sensitive." A week later, Jack came home early from work for the first time in months. He looked pale, tired. His backpack hung off one shoulder. "What happened?" Laura asked, alarmed. "Back's killing me," he muttered. "Can't sit in the truck anymore. It's like there's a brick lodged under my skin." They sat together on the couch, quiet, the kind of silence that feels like something breaking. "I think we need to do something," Laura said finally. Jack nodded. And that's when everything began to unravel. For a little while, things didn't seem so urgent. Jack went back to work. Laura stopped mentioning the lump. They fell back into their routines. Coffee in the morning, work calls, long shifts at the job site, takeout on Thursdays. From the outside, everything looked normal, stable. But under the surface, something had shifted. Jack's mood changed first. He was more irritable, quicker to shut down conversations. When Laura asked how his back felt, he'd snap. "It's fine," even when she saw him wince trying to sit down. He started sleeping on his side, with a pillow between him and the mattress so the lump wouldn't press against anything. Laura, in turn, became more careful. She stopped asking as often. She didn't want to push him away, but she was watching, and what she saw made her nervous. The lump now looked like a full sphere under the skin, protruding with a smooth, stretched surface that reflected light in certain angles. It wasn't just growing outward, it was altering the way Jack moved. He sat forward more, hunched slightly to avoid pressure. He leaned against doorframes instead of chairs with backs. When he was tired, he would instinctively bring his hand to the spot, rubbing it gently as if trying to soothe something deeper. Then there was the smell. One night, while folding laundry in the bedroom, Laura caught a strange, faint odor in the air. Sour, slightly metallic. She sniffed the shirt she'd just picked up. It was Jack's work shirt. She leaned closer and realized the smell was coming from the upper back area. She checked the spot and noticed a slight dampness. Not much, just a hint of moisture, like the skin was weeping. "Jack," she called. "Can I look at your back?" "Now?" he replied from the living room. "Yes, please." He walked in slowly, and without waiting for permission, she lifted his shirt. Her breath caught. The lump had a darker patch near the center now. It wasn't just red, it was turning purplish around the edges. And that tiny dark spot? It had widened. The skin there looked almost thinned out, translucent, like it could split at any moment. "Jack, this doesn't look good." He tensed. "You said that last month." "No, I mean, it's different now. It's leaking." He pulled away from her hand. "It's fine." "It's not fine. It could be infected. I've had worse. You haven't had this." Jack exhaled sharply, rubbing his face. "Look, I know what you're thinking, but it's going to cost a fortune, and I'm not letting some doctor charge me $5,000 to slice it open in an office. There are clinics, urgent care, outpatient, still hundreds, maybe thousands. And for what? A lump. If it starts hurting bad, I'll go." Laura stared at him, frustrated and heartbroken. "It's already hurting." He didn't respond. The next day, he left for work at 5:30 a.m. without saying much. She watched him drive off and sat in silence for a long time, the weight of helplessness settling deep into her chest. Over the next week, Jack kept his distance, physically and emotionally. He was quieter, more withdrawn, but he kept showing up to work. When Laura offered to make a doctor's appointment for him, he brushed her off. She tried giving him space. She tried not mentioning it. Then came the night that changed everything. It was a Saturday. Laura had made dinner, nothing fancy, just pasta and garlic bread. Jack barely touched it. He looked exhausted. His eyes were dull, with deep shadows underneath. After dinner, he peeled off his shirt and sat on the edge of the bed, his back to her. Laura gasped. The lump had swollen. The skin over it was red and glistening, like stretched plastic wrap. The center was darker now, almost black-blue, and veins spidered out from it in a disturbing pattern. "Jack," he didn't turn around. "I know. You have to go in. We have to see someone. It looks dangerous." He nodded slowly. "I was thinking, maybe we could try something else first." Laura stepped closer, heart pounding. "What do you mean?" "I've seen these videos online, about how to drain a cyst. There's a way to do it clean. Gloves, antiseptic, gauze. Just relieve the pressure. Then I can heal without surgery." Laura stared at him, unsure if he was serious. "Jack, this isn't a YouTube DIY. This is your body." E finally turned his head slightly. His voice was quiet. "I'm scared. I can't afford a hospital bill. But I can't live like this anymore, Burr." Aura sat down beside him. Her voice was gentle, trembling. "We don't know what's inside it. If it's infected, if there's tissue damage, what if we make it worse? What if we make it better?" he replied, barely above a whisper. They sat in silence for a long time. Later that night, Laura stayed up searching the internet. She read about cysts, epidermoid, sebaceous, abscesses. She found forums full of people who'd drained them at home. Some had good results, others ended up in the ER. One thread mentioned a man who nearly died after rupturing a cyst that had become internally infected. She closed the laptop and walked quietly to the bathroom. The counter was clean. She opened the drawer, pulled out gloves, antiseptic wipes, gauze. She laid them out one by one, staring at them like weapons on a battlefield. In the hallway, she could hear Jack brushing his teeth, trying to act normal. Her hands shook. She didn't want to do it. But he had already made up his mind. The next morning, they would try. Sunday morning arrived heavy with silence. Laura woke up before Jack. She lay still in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the soft sound of the shower running in the bathroom. Her heart was pounding, not from fear of what she would do, but fear of what she couldn't undo once it was done. When Jack came out of the bathroom, wrapped in a towel, he gave her a small nod. "Let's get this over with." They didn't talk much as they set up. The apartment's small bathroom felt colder than usual. Laura laid out everything on the countertop: antiseptic solution, a pair of clean nitrile gloves, alcohol wipes, gauze, sterile bandages, and towels. Jack pulled an armless wooden stool into the center of the bathroom and sat down, shirtless, leaning slightly forward. The lump on his back rose between his shoulder blades, like a grotesque second spine. It was larger than she remembered. The skin was stretched to a shine, so taut it looked like it might split from pressure alone. The darkened center, which once looked like a small pore, had widened into a pinhole crater. The veins around it looked angry, blue, purple, and red, branching like a roadmap of stress beneath his skin. Laura took a deep breath and slipped on the gloves. "I need to clean the area first." "Okay," Jack said, his voice tight. She poured antiseptic onto gauze and gently wiped the surface of the skin around the cyst. Jack flinched slightly. "Sorry, it's fine. Just do what you have to." She cleaned it again, then again, going wider this time, covering his upper back. She didn't know if it would be enough. She wasn't a nurse, just someone who had spent too many late nights watching internet videos of people doing things like this with gloves and confidence. But now, standing here, this didn't feel like something she could watch and learn her way through. "You ready?" she asked quietly. "Just press." Laura positioned her fingers on either side of the lump. She hesitated, then began applying pressure, gently at first, then gradually firmer. The skin resisted. "It didn't give easily," Jack groaned. "Harder. You have to go harder. I don't want to hurt you. It already hurts. Just go." Laura pushed harder. Her thumbs and palms sank into the skin surrounding the cyst, trying to create an upward force toward the darkened center. Still, nothing came out. The mass was firm, almost solid. Then something shifted. She felt it, deep inside, the tension break. And then the cyst erupted. A thick jet of off-white material shot from the darkened center, hitting the mirror in front of them with a wet, sickening splat. Laura gasped and jerked back as more followed, pouring out in bursts like some grotesque fountain. The smell hit her next, a sour, decaying odor that made her stomach lurch. Jack hissed in pain, gripping the edges of the stool. "Jesus Christ." Laura grabbed a towel and tried to catch the discharge, but it was coming out fast, much faster than she'd expected. The consistency was thick, like toothpaste laced with pus and blood. Some of it had chunks. Some of it was yellow, some pale white. It coated the towel. It sprayed onto the floor. "Keep going," Jack grunted. She pressed again. Another surge came out, this time mixed with reddish fluid. She paused, alarmed. "That's blood," she said. "Yeah, well, it's open, right? Just finish it." She applied pressure again, but now the material was thinner, mixed more heavily with fluid. The skin around the opening was sagging, as if the mass inside had deflated. Laura reached for gauze, wiping away the drainage to get a better look. "Jack, it's still going. Drain it all. Better out than in," but something didn't feel right. The release had gone on too long. The amount of fluid was far more than she thought was even possible. When she gently lifted one corner of the towel, she saw red-tinged fluid still seeping from the opening, slow but constant. And now the cavity didn't look clean. It looked jagged inside. Torn. Raw. "This doesn't look good," she whispered. Jack was pale now, sweating. His breathing had quickened. "Just clean it up. It's got to be almost done." Laura pressed more gauze against the wound, trying to absorb the fluid. It soaked through in seconds. She grabbed another towel. The mirror, sink, and floor were covered in foul-smelling material. Her gloves were slick with it. Her stomach turned again. She looked at Jack, really looked. His face was pale, his eyes glassy. His lips were slightly dry. This is worse than I thought," she said. Jack shook his head. "We got it out. I feel better. You don't look better. I just need to rest." She disinfected the wound as best she could, which made Jack clench his fists and grunt in pain. She packed it with sterile gauze, then covered the area with clean bandages. Her hands were shaking, I'll check it again tonight, she said. Jack nodded. Thanks. You're amazing. She didn't answer. Later that night, when she changed the bandage, she noticed the gauze was soaked again. The wound was still draining. The tissue looked angry and inflamed, and the smell, though slightly fainter, was still wrong, like something rotting under the surface. Jack said he was sore, but okay, took a couple Tylenol, went to bed early. Laura lay awake in the dark, staring at the ceiling again, dread coiling in her gut like a cold knot. She didn't know yet that bacteria had already begun to flood Jack's bloodstream, that what they had done, with gloves and towels and videos, had torn tissue deep inside, that the cyst wall had ruptured inward as well as out, seeding infection into muscle, fat, maybe even into vessels too small to see. She didn't know yet that their bathroom would become a crime scene of unintended consequence, or that the clock was already ticking. The following morning, Jack didn't wake up at his usual time. Laura was already in the kitchen making coffee when she realized something was off. Normally by 6:15 a.m., Jack would be dressed and grabbing his thermos, keys in hand, ready to beat traffic to the job site. But today, the bedroom door stayed closed. She walked quietly into the room. The light was dim, the blinds still drawn. Jack was in bed, curled slightly on his side. He didn't stir. "Jack?" she said gently. He groaned. Laura stepped closer. His skin looked pale, almost gray. She reached out and touched his forehead. It was warm, too warm. "Jack, you're burning up. I feel off," he murmured. "Just tired." She helped him sit up. He moved slowly, with effort, and winced when he adjusted his posture. "Let me check the wound," she said. He nodded. Laura peeled back the bandage carefully. Her breath caught in her throat. The area around the wound was redder now, swollen, hot to the touch. The opening had started to ooze again, thick fluid that was no longer whitish but yellow-green, and it smelled worse, sharper, deeper. A sick sweet rot that made her stomach clench. "I don't like this," she whispered. "It's just healing," Jack said weakly. "Inflammation, right?" "This isn't inflammation," she said, her voice rising. "This is infection. This is spreading." Jack shook his head slowly. "I took antibiotics." "What?" "Those old ones. From when I had that sinus infection last year. There were a few left." Her heart sank. "Jack, you can't do that. You don't take leftover antibiotics like that. They're probably expired. And even if they weren't, it's not enough. It's not the right kind. That's how superbugs happen." He shrugged. Didn't know what else to do. Laura looked at him, tears burning behind her eyes. "We need to go to the hospital. Now." Jack hesitated, trying to find strength in a body that was already starting to fail him. "I just need a little more rest. If I still feel bad tonight, we'll go, I promise." But he never made it to the evening. By mid-afternoon, Jack was lying on the couch, drenched in sweat, though he was covered in blankets. His face was ashen. He was shivering violently, his teeth chattering, even though the thermostat read 74 degrees. Laura tried to take his temperature. It read 102.4. She checked the wound again. The redness had expanded. What had been the size of a softball was now bordered by red inflammation extending out nearly 6 inches in every direction. Worse, Laura saw something she only recognized from internet searches. Red lines, streaking outward from the wound toward Jack's shoulders and down toward his spine, like tendrils of ink under the skin. That's when the fear crystallized into certainty. "Sepsis." "Jack," she said, grabbing her purse. "We're going. You don't get to argue." He was too weak to protest. At the ER, things moved quickly. As soon as the triage nurse saw the wound, the streaks, and the fever, Jack was taken straight to a room. No waiting, no paperwork. Monitors were connected, 4S inserted, blood drawn. Laura sat beside him, clutching his hand, trying not to cry. "Doctor." Alan Pierce entered the room moments later, flipping through Jack's chart on a tablet. "I'm told this was a ruptured cyst. Drained at home?" he asked, looking between them. Laura nodded. "It was huge. He didn't want to see a doctor." Pierce raised an eyebrow. "Softball-sized?" Jack gave a tired smile. "That's about right." The doctor leaned forward and carefully peeled back the dressing. His expression changed. "This is advanced cellulitis," he said. "And that," he pointed to the red streaks, "is lymphangitis. That means the infection is spreading through your lymphatic system." Jack blinked, trying to focus. What does that mean? It means the bacteria is moving fast. You're already showing systemic symptoms: fever, low blood pressure, rapid heart rate. We call that sepsis. You're going to need 4 antibiotics immediately, and most likely surgical debridement. Surgery? Laura repeated, alarmed. Pierce nodded. The internal cavity likely wasn't fully emptied. The pressure from the manual drainage forced some of the cyst contents deeper into the tissue, maybe even into blood vessels. That creates pockets of infection that the body can't fight on its own. He paused. If you had waited another 12 hours, he could have gone into septic shock. As it is, he's on the edge. Laura felt like the floor dropped out from under her. Jack was admitted directly to the ICU. Over the next 12 hours, his condition worsened, his blood pressure dropped, nurses increased fluid administration. They started vasopressors to keep his blood circulating. His white blood cell count skyrocketed. His temperature spiked to 103.1. Dr. Elaine Carter, the infectious disease specialist, visited his bedside that night. "We've started vancomycin and piperacillin tazobactam," she told Laura. "Broad-spectrum antibiotics to cover both staph and strep bacteria. Once we get blood culture results, we can narrow the treatment. But for now, we're fighting blind." Laura nodded numbly. "Do you know what strain it is?" she asked. Dr. Carter sighed. "Too soon to tell. But it's likely Staph aureus. If it's MRSA, we'll know in 24 hours. Laura sat by Jack's bed, holding his hand, watching his chest rise and fall under the oxygen mask. She hadn't slept. She couldn't eat. All she could think was, we did this. We made this choice, and now he might not make it. She remembered what Jack had said when he refused to go to the doctor. "I can't afford a $5,000 bill." Now they were in a hospital bed that probably cost $5,000 a day, not counting the ICU, not counting the surgery. And yet, none of that mattered now. All that mattered was whether he would make it to the next morning. Jack spent the first night in the ICU fighting for his life. Every hour, nurses came in to check his vitals. Blood pressure, oxygen saturation, urine output, each number became a measure of hope or dread. Laura sat beside him, bleary-eyed and numb, her hand never leaving his. She barely noticed the sting of her dry eyes, or the ache in her back from the stiff plastic chair. Her whole world was contained within the rhythmic beeping of the monitors. Around 3 a.m., Jack became delirious. His fever had climbed to 103.7. He muttered fragments of words, called her by his mother's name once, then whispered something unintelligible about a ladder and a beam. The nurses reassured her it was common in sepsis patients, but it chilled her to the core. "His body's in overdrive," one nurse explained. "It's like a fire inside him, trying to burn out the infection." Laura nodded, wiping sweat from Jack's brow. "I'm just scared." "We are too," the nurse admitted gently, "but he's young, that helps." At sunrise, Dr. Pierce returned. He had reviewed Jack's labs and imaging and didn't like what he saw. The white blood cell count is still rising. His CRP and procalcitonin, both inflammatory markers, are high. His blood pressure's only staying up because of the norepinephrine drip. That tells me his body's not winning. He paused, scanning Jack's pale face. "We have a CT scan scheduled this morning. We need to see how deep this infection goes. If there's any necrotic tissue, or worse, pockets of pus we can't reach from the surface, he'll need surgical debridement." Laura nodded slowly. "When?" "Soon. If it looks bad, we'll operate tonight." The CT scan confirmed what everyone feared. The infection had traveled deeper than expected. The cavity beneath the original cyst site extended several centimeters into Jack's back tissue, through the subcutaneous fat, and into the underlying fascial layers. There was evidence of fluid tracking along the muscular planes, a sign that bacteria had migrated between tissue compartments. Dr. Carter, the infectious disease specialist, reviewed the results with Laura while Jack slept fitfully under sedation. "What this scan shows is that the cyst wasn't just under the skin anymore," she said. "It may have started there, but once it ruptured, especially with that much internal pressure, it acted like a bomb. The wall tore inward and outward, forcing bacteria and cyst contents deep into the tissue." She tapped on the scan. "See these striations? That's inflammatory spread. This is no longer a simple wound. It's what we call a complicated soft tissue infection. We need to open it up surgically." Laura swallowed hard. "Will he be okay?" Dr. Carter looked at her. "He has a good chance, but we're in the critical window now. We don't do this in time, he could go into septic shock." And that's when organs start shutting down. That afternoon, Jack's blood cultures came back, Staphylococcus aureus. Not MRSA, thank God, but a particularly virulent strain. Dr. Carter adjusted the antibiotic regimen based on the results. But even as they fought the infection with medication, the visible signs on Jack's body told another story. The redness around the wound had grown wider. The lymphangitic streaks were now crawling toward his upper shoulders. His skin felt like fire. His blood pressure was volatile, up, then dangerously low, then barely holding. He couldn't keep food down. His urine output decreased. That evening, Laura stood outside his room while Dr. Pierce and the surgical team prepped him for emergency surgery. "We need to remove all the infected tissue," Dr. Pierce explained. "And if it's worse than we think, we may have to take some of the surrounding muscle. The goal is simple: stop the spread." "Will he need to be put under?" Laura asked. "Yes. General anesthesia. It'll be a 2-hour procedure, minimum. Maybe longer." "Will there be scarring?" Pierce nodded. "Yes, a lot. But scarring is a small price if we can save his life." As they wheeled Jack away, Laura followed until the double doors of the OR blocked her path. Then she sat down in the empty waiting room, hugging herself. For the first time in 3 days, she cried. Not quiet tears, real sobs. The kind that shake your whole body and leave your breath coming in gasps. She cried for Jack, for the decision they made, for their fear, and for every moment she'd sat in silence, watching that cyst grow and hoping it would magically go away. They should have gone to a doctor. They should have paid the $300 consultation fee and asked for help when the lump was still the size of a marble. But they were like so many others, people who lived paycheck to paycheck, with deductibles too high to be useful. People who feared one ER visit could wipe out months of rent. Jack wasn't careless. He was careful. That's why he waited. That's why he said, "It's just a cyst," over and over until it wasn't. This was the hidden epidemic no one liked to talk about, the cost of delay, the price of avoidance. The real danger of a healthcare system where getting help was too expensive, and DIY looked safer than bankruptcy. She cried until there were no tears left, and then she waited. The operating room was bright, sterile, and quiet, except for the soft hum of monitors and the clatter of surgical instruments being prepared. Jack lay unconscious on the table, his back exposed, a crescent of red and inflamed skin surrounding the wound where the cyst had ruptured. Drapes shielded the rest of his body. Machines monitored every beat, every breath, every fluctuation in pressure and oxygen. Dr. Margaret Thompson, the attending general surgeon, stepped into the OR, fully scrubbed and focused. She had reviewed the imaging, consulted with the infectious disease team, and now stood ready to do what had to be done: save this man's life. Her voice was calm but decisive. "Scalpel." The first incision was made above the ruptured site to create a clean surgical window. The smell was immediate and unmistakable, fetid, putrid. An odor that told her this infection had gone far deeper than skin level. As she carefully expanded the opening, thick, yellow-green purulence began to spill from the cavity, confirming the CT findings, and then some. "Get suction in here, irrigation ready." The infected tissue ran deep, at least 8 centimeters beneath the surface, tracking along muscle fibers and fascia. Pockets of pus were embedded within inflamed fatty tissue, and multiple necrotic areas showed where the infection had already destroyed viable cells. The cyst wall had not only ruptured, it had fragmented. Sections of keratinous material, soft chalky clumps, and decaying tissue were scattered deep in the wound. Dr. Thompson worked quickly but thoroughly, excising all visible infected material, layer by layer. Some of the surrounding muscle was inflamed and partially necrotic. It too had to go. "This isn't a simple abscess anymore," she said quietly to her resident. "This is post-rupture contamination with deep tissue necrosis. He's lucky he came in when he did." She continued for over 2 hours. Once all non-viable tissue had been removed, she irrigated the cavity with liters of warm sterile saline, using pulsed lavage to flush out microscopic debris and any residual bacteria. When she was satisfied with the debridement, she turned to wound management. The cavity left behind was enormous, approximately 6 inches long, 4 inches wide, and 4 inches deep. Closing it primarily wasn't an option. To do so would trap bacteria inside and guarantee reinfection. Instead, She inserted a wound vacuum-assisted closure system, a wound vac. The device would keep constant negative pressure inside the cavity, drawing out fluids, reducing swelling, and stimulating granulation tissue to fill the void. A long tube was affixed and connected to the canister pump. Apply dressing. Monitor drainage closely. We'll reassess in 3 days, she instructed. By the time Jack was wheeled out of the OR and into post-op recovery, the staff had disposed of several trays of contaminated gauze and instruments. The surgical report documented the extent of the damage: epidermoid cyst rupture, complicated by soft tissue infection, with extensive debridement and wound vac placement. As he lay in recovery, still sedated, machines keeping him stable, Dr. Thompson stepped outside to speak with Laura. She found Laura sitting alone in the waiting area, her eyes hollow, her face drawn. When she saw Dr. Thompson, she stood instantly. "How is he?" she asked, voice shaking. Dr. Thompson didn't sugarcoat it. "He's stable. The surgery went as well as we could hope." Laura closed her eyes briefly, relief flooding her chest. But, the doctor continued, the infection had spread deeper than expected. The cyst wall was completely ruptured, and the contents contaminated his back tissue significantly. We removed multiple fragments and a large amount of infected tissue, some of it muscle. Laura's hand covered her mouth. "Oh my God." "We've placed a wound vac. The cavity is too large to close right now. It will need to heal from the inside out." "How long?" Dr. Thompson's expression softened. "Weeks, maybe months. He'll be in the ICU for a few more days at least, followed by a step-down unit. After that, he'll need home care. 4 antibiotics, wound dressing changes, physical rest." Laura nodded, trying to process it all. "He'll recover," the doctor said gently. "But it will take time, and effort, and patience." Laura looked up at her. "Did we almost lose him?" Dr. Thompson hesitated, then said, "Honestly, yes, you were within 12 hours of septic shock. If you had waited until morning, he might not have survived." Jack woke up in the ICU later that night. He was groggy, disoriented, and in pain. His back felt strange, pressurized, not painful exactly, but tight and uncomfortable. His mouth was dry, his body weak. But he was alive. Laura was there. As soon as his eyes fluttered open, she rushed to his side. "You made it," she whispered, choking back emotion. "You're okay." He tried to speak, but only managed a hoarse croak. She handed him ice chips and stroked his hair. "You had surgery. They had to take a lot out. But you're okay now. You're going to be okay." Jack closed his eyes again. A tear slid from one corner. "I'm sorry," he managed. "I'm so sorry." Later that night, when the nurse came to check his wound vac, Jack asked to see it. Laura hesitated, but nodded. The nurse gently peeled back the top of the dressing and revealed the cavity, still packed and suctioned. Jack stared in silence. It looked like something from a battlefield, a crater of red and yellow flesh, jagged at the edges, sunken in the center. His back, once smooth and unscarred, was now marked by surgery and trauma. "That's from the cyst?" he asked. "Yes," the nurse said. "It's from what it turned into." Jack looked at Laura. "I did this," he whispered. She squeezed his hand. "No, we didn't know. We were trying to help. But we won't make that mistake again." They sat in silence for a long time, the soft hum of machines around them. Jack's eyes drifted toward the ceiling. All he could think about was the moment in the bathroom. When she asked, "Are you sure?" and he had said, "Just do it." Now everything was different, and everything was real. The first few days after surgery were a blur. Jack remained in the ICU, tethered to 4 lines, a heart monitor, a blood pressure cuff that inflated every 15 minutes, and the constant, gentle suction of the wound vac, humming from the device attached to his back. He couldn't move much, not because he was restrained, but because his entire body ached with a depth of exhaustion he'd never known. Laura never left. She slept in a stiff vinyl chair beside his bed, helped the nurses reposition him, brought warm compresses, adjusted his pillows, and spoke softly to soothe him when the nightmares came. Sepsis wasn't just a physical invasion, it did something to the mind, too. Jack would drift in and out of vivid hallucinations, visions of falling, drowning, being buried. He'd whisper strange things. One night, he called out for his brother who had died years ago. Laura held his hand through every one. Each day, The ICU nurses carefully checked his vitals. His fever had broken on the third morning. His blood pressure stabilized. His white blood cell count began to drop, a sign the infection was retreating, but his body was still weak, his appetite nearly non-existent, and the pain was constant. The wound vac needed to be managed twice a day. Laura watched the nurses work, unwrapping, cleaning, repacking. Every time, she fought the urge to turn away. She didn't want to see what was under the bandages, but she made herself look. Jack needed her to be strong. The cavity in his back was unlike anything she'd imagined. Raw tissue, jagged edges, deep enough to fit a closed fist. The nurses packed it with long strips of medicated gauze, one layer at a time, explaining how the wound needed to heal from the inside out, slowly by growing new tissue at the base first. "This is going to take months," one nurse said gently. "But you're healing. That's the most important thing." Jack said little. He felt shame radiating from inside him, almost worse than the physical pain. Each time someone peeled back the dressing or mentioned the surgery, he'd go silent. He didn't want to talk about the bathroom, or the cyst, or what came after. He just wanted to disappear. On the fourth day, Dr. Thompson returned for a post-surgical evaluation. "You're healing well," she said, checking the site. "No signs of spreading infection. We're seeing granulation tissue forming at the base of the wound. That's a good sign." Jack managed a weak nod. "You'll be moved out of the ICU tomorrow," she continued. "You'll still need 4 antibiotics and wound care, but your vitals are strong enough for step-down recovery." Laura exhaled in relief, but Jack looked away. Dr. Thompson hesitated, then added, "This may feel like the end of the danger, but it's really just the start of healing. And that can be just as hard, especially emotionally." Jack didn't answer. She touched his shoulder gently. "Let us know if you want to speak with someone. It helps." That night, Jack finally spoke. "I keep seeing it," he whispered, as Laura helped him sip water. "The moment it popped, the way it hit the mirror, I thought we did it right." Laura stayed quiet. "I thought it would shrink and go away, that we'd be done, that I'd feel better." "You didn't know," she said softly. "We were trying to avoid something we thought we couldn't afford." He nodded slowly. "We were stupid." "No," she corrected him. "We were scared." She paused. "This system makes you choose between your health and your savings account. That's the problem." Jack's eyes welled with tears. "It's my fault." "It's not." Laura squeezed his hand. "We're going to get through it, but we also need to talk about what comes next." He looked at her, afraid. "They said we'll be discharged in about a week. You'll still need the 4 antibiotics for 4 more weeks, and the wound has to be packed twice a day." Jack flinched. "Who's going to do that?" "I will," she said without hesitation. You shouldn't have to." She leaned in, brushing a strand of hair from his face. "We're in this together. I'm not going anywhere." When Jack was transferred to the step-down recovery ward, things felt quieter, less chaotic, but not easier. The room was private, with a small window looking out on a row of trees, their bare winter branches reaching skyward. Snow had fallen lightly overnight. Nurses still came often, but the pace had slowed. Jack was more alert now, and that came with a new challenge: boredom and awareness. He saw his body for the first time in full, the sunken cavity in his back, the scar from the central line, the bruising along his ribs from 4S and injections. His reflection in the bathroom mirror startled him. He had lost weight. His face looked gaunt, eyes sunken, hair messy. He didn't recognize himself. Worse, he didn't feel like himself. There were nights when he didn't sleep. Nights when he stared at the ceiling and replayed the last few years. How many times he'd ignored the bump, brushed off Laura's concern, said it's just a cyst. He remembered skipping the clinic appointment she'd begged him to make. Remembered laughing at YouTube videos of extractions and saying, "See? People do this all the time. No one ever showed this part. The surgery, the ICU, the price, B-bar." He wound on his back wasn't just physical anymore. It was a reminder of everything they'd tried to avoid, and paid for anyway, tenfold. Laura, meanwhile, had started researching home health care. Jack would be discharged with a PICC line, a long-term 4 catheter inserted into a vein in his arm and threaded close to his heart. Through that line, he'd receive daily doses of strong antibiotics at home. The line needed to be flushed with saline and heparin daily to prevent clots. It had to stay clean, dry, and sterile. She would also need to learn how to pack his wound, apply new dressings, and monitor for signs of reinfection, redness, warmth, fever, changes in drainage color or odor. A home health nurse would visit 3 times a week, but Laura would be his main caregiver. She felt equal parts terrified and determined. "I've never done this before," she told one of the hospital nurses. "What if I mess up?" The nurse smiled kindly. "That's what we're here for. We'll teach you everything. And you're already doing the most important thing, showing up." Before discharge, Jack met with a hospital social worker. They discussed insurance, the bills, the upcoming invoices from the ICU stay, surgery, wound vac rental, 4 antibiotics, home nursing. Even with his limited coverage, their out-of-pocket costs were expected to exceed $40,000. Jack stared at the paper in disbelief. "I tried to avoid a $1,000 procedure," he said quietly. "Now I owe 40 times that." The social worker nodded. "You're not alone. It happens more than you think." He folded the paper. "How many people don't make it in time?" "Too many." Jack looked up, eyes red. "We need to tell people." The social worker tilted her head. "Tell them what?" "That this isn't rare. That this can happen to anyone." Discharge day came with more relief than celebration. Jack sat in a wheelchair, waiting by the nurse's station, while Laura signed the final paperwork. He wore a loose hoodie that hid the bandages on his back, a surgical mask to protect his still vulnerable immune system, and a quiet, subdued expression. The past 2 weeks had changed him, physically, mentally, emotionally. The nurse handed Laura a large folder, thick with instructions: daily wound care, PICC line flushing instructions, your home nurse's contact sheet, medication schedule, and emergency signs to watch for. "There's also information on financial assistance programs," she added gently. Laura thanked her, heart pounding with the weight of everything she now carried, literally and figuratively. She wasn't just his partner anymore. She was his nurse, his advocate, his emotional anchor. At home, the reality of the road ahead hit fast. Their apartment, once a cozy Denver one-bedroom filled with laughter and lazy Sunday mornings, had become something else, a mini recovery ward. Laura had rearranged the bedroom so Jack could lie on his stomach without pressure on his back. She stacked sterile dressings and medical gauze on the nightstand. The wound vac machine sat humming softly near the bed, a tangle of tubing and suction cups. The PICC line in Jack's left arm was protected with a sleeve and secured with medical tape. Twice a day, Laura had to sanitize her hands, clean the port, flush it with saline, and administer high-dose 4 antibiotics. She followed the nurse's guide step by step, her hands trembling at first. But soon, her movements became steadier. Jack hardly spoke for the first few days. He slept often. The painkillers dulled his senses, but they didn't take away the deeper ache, the sense that his body had betrayed him, or maybe he had betrayed it. He had always been strong, lifting beams at work, climbing ladders, playing softball with the guys on weekends. Now, even walking to the bathroom left him winded. Laura kept the mood light when she could. "You've been upgraded to premium home care," she joked one morning, preparing the dressing tray. Jack gave her a faint smile, but his eyes still clouded. Wound care became a twice-daily ritual. Each time, Laura carefully peeled back the dressing, exposing the gaping crater in Jack's back. The wound had begun to shrink slowly, but it was still a deep, red cavern surrounded by healing skin. Jack refused to look at it. "Just tell me how it's doing," he'd say. Laura always answered gently, "It's getting smaller, healthier. You're healing." But inside, she grieved. She grieved for the scar he would always carry, for the pain he had endured, and for the fear that still clung to both of them. Fear that it might come back, or worse, that they wouldn't catch something next time. They fell into a rhythm, flush the PICC line, change the dressing, check his temperature, monitor for streaks or swelling, then rest, eat if he could, sleep again. Repeat. But the silence between them grew. One night, as she finished cleaning up after another painful dressing change, Jack finally broke it. "I'm not who I was." Laura sat beside him on the bed. "No, you're not, but you're still here. I feel like half a person," he said, eyes burning. "I can't work. I can't even lift a grocery bag. You're doing everything, and I just lie here." "You're recovering," she said gently. "You almost died. This is what healing looks like." He turned away. "I keep thinking, if I had just gone to the doctor 3 years ago, this would have been nothing. A few stitches, maybe a scar the size of a dime. Not this. Laura took his hand. I know, and I thought it too. Every day. But we can't go back. We can only go forward. He nodded, but the weight didn't lift. A few weeks into recovery, Jack's home nurse, Regina, started pushing for emotional care. You've been through trauma, she said during one visit, and that kind of trauma sticks, especially when you feel like it's your fault. Jack looked at her, surprised by her directness. Wouldn't you feel that way? He asked. Regina didn't hesitate. Of course, but I'd also remember that most people avoid the doctor because they're scared, not just of the diagnosis, but of the bill. She glanced at Laura. This country makes people choose between bankruptcy and treatment. That's not your fault. That's the system. Jack blinked, tears threatening. You're not weak, Regina continued. You're human, and you survived. Around the same time, the medical bills started arriving. The ICU stay, the emergency surgery, the CT scans, the lab work, the surgical debridement, the wound vac, the antibiotics, the home health care. Total cost, $182,000. Insurance covered most of it, but not all. Jack's out-of-pocket responsibility, $43,600. He stared at the total like it was written in a foreign language. That's more than my truck cost, he said. That's more than my college degree, Laura added. They sat in silence. Then Jack laughed, dry and humorless, all to avoid a $200 doctor visit. As he healed slowly, Jack began to write. It started as a journal, then letters, then a blog post. He wanted people to know what had happened, not the sanitized version, but the truth, the smell in the bathroom, the pain, the fear, the shame, the machines, the wound vac, the moment he thought he was going to die. He posted his story on Reddit. My name is Jack Monroe, it began, and I ignored a back cyst for 3 years. By the time I tried to drain it at home, it had grown to the size of a softball. What happened next nearly killed me. He added pictures, before and after. A photo of the cyst, the wound, the PICC line, the scar. The post went viral overnight. Thousands of comments poured in, some horrified, some sympathetic, some sharing similar stories. Many thanked him. I've had a cyst on my neck for 6 months, one comment read. Your story just made me book an appointment. Others opened up about the cost of care. I'm in the same boat, skipped the doctor because I couldn't afford it, ended up in the ER. $25,000 later, I'm still paying it off. One nurse wrote, I wish more people knew this is what happens when cysts get infected. It's not just a pop and done. Jack read every comment. Some made him cry, some made him angry, but all of them made him feel something he hadn't felt since the beginning of this nightmare: purpose. By the time he reached his 3rd month of recovery, the wound was no longer a crater. It was a deep, puckered scar, pink and raised, surrounded by healthier skin. The dressing changes had gone from twice a day to once. The PICC line had been removed. The antibiotics were done. He could walk again, slowly. He could make it to the kitchen without needing to sit. He wasn't ready for work, but he was closer. One morning, as Laura helped him change into a clean shirt, he caught sight of his back in the mirror. He flinched, at first, then looked again. The scar was wide, ugly, and permanent. But it was also proof he had made it. 3 months after the surgery, Jack sat in his favorite chair near the living room window, a hot mug of tea warming his hands. Outside, spring had begun to thaw the last traces of snow. Buds were forming on the trees. Life, in its quiet way, was beginning again. And so was he. The road to this point had not been easy. Some days, Jack still woke up drenched in sweat, flashes of the ICU monitors and sterile lights haunting his sleep. Other times he'd zone out mid-conversation, his mind replaying the moment in the bathroom when everything went so horribly wrong. The moment that split his life in two, before the pop, and after. Laura had suggested therapy. Jack resisted at first, but after a long night of silence and a tearful conversation on the kitchen floor, he agreed. His therapist, Dr. Lang, was in her 50s, calm-voiced, with eyes that seemed to see too much. She didn't push him. She waited, and eventually Jack talked. I was scared, he admitted in one session, of the money, of being judged, of what it would mean if it wasn't just a cyst. Dr. Lang nodded. Fear often looks like avoidance. Jack stared at his hands. I told myself it wasn't a big deal, that it didn't hurt, that I could live with it. And when it became too big to live with, I still tried to fix it myself. Dr. Lang was quiet a moment, then said, "When we avoid discomfort in the short term, we often create deeper pain in the long term." Jack had to look away. He and Laura had grown closer through it all, though it hadn't been without struggle. The stress of caregiving, the financial strain, the emotional weight, they tested their relationship in ways neither of them had anticipated. Some nights ended in tears, others in silence. But they kept showing up for each other. They developed a ritual: Friday night reflections, no phones, no distractions, just tea, soft music, and open conversation. One night, Jack asked her, "Did you ever think about leaving?" Laura took a sip, then looked him in the eye. "No. But I thought about how easy it would have been if we'd just gone to the doctor when it was small." She placed her mug down. "I replay that day in the bathroom 100 times. I see myself pressing on your back, the spray, the blood, the towels. I thought we were helping." Jack nodded. "So did I." They sat in silence for a while. Then Laura said something that stuck with him for days. "It wasn't just about the cyst, Jack. It was about how we've been taught to treat pain, ignore it, hide it, survive it. Especially men. Especially people who can't afford to be sick." As his body healed, Jack began speaking up more online. He started a blog. He shared updates on his recovery. He posted photos, graphs, costs. He wanted people to see the full picture, not just the horror of the infection, but the system that allowed it to happen. He wrote about why people delay care, high deductibles and poor insurance plans, fear of missing work and losing income, stigma around overreacting to health issues, lack of access to affordable clinics. He included stats. 1 in 4 Americans skip necessary medical care due to cost. Medical debt is the leading cause of personal bankruptcy in the U.S., and he shared this hard truth. Trying to save $200 ended up costing me $43,000, and a permanent scar. The post went viral again. This time, it wasn't just Reddit. Health journalists reached out. A nurse-led podcast invited him to speak. A local TV station in Denver aired a short segment titled, "When Healthcare Delayed Becomes a Medical Emergency." Laura filmed Jack sitting on their couch, speaking directly to the camera. "I'm not a doctor. I'm just a guy who ignored something for too long because I thought I couldn't afford to fix it," he said. "If you have a lump, a cyst, a weird mole, please go get it checked. Don't wait, don't guess, don't try to pop it yourself. You might get lucky. Or you might end up like me." He turned slightly, revealing the large puckered scar on his back. The camera zoomed in for a moment. "This is what saving money looked like for me." Jack's story started circulating in patient safety forums, online medical communities, and even training sessions for healthcare students. A nurse named Sandra messaged him, "We now use your case as an example in our infection control module. Thank you for being brave enough to share." Jack read the message twice, then showed it to Laura. "I didn't expect this," he said. She smiled. "Sometimes your pain becomes someone else's education." Despite the attention, not everything got easier. The financial strain remained. They were on a payment plan with the hospital. Jack had opened a GoFundMe, and while generous people had contributed over $12,000, there was still a long road ahead. H couldn't return to construction yet, not with limited mobility and lifting restrictions. So he began freelancing from home, doing part-time drafting and design consulting. Laura took extra shifts at the bookstore where she worked. Bought bar tea. EY cut back. No more streaming services, no takeout, no vacations. But they were making it work. DBRS. Ill. The tension lingered. Afternoon. After paying another bill, Jack stared at the statement in disbelief. $43,000, he muttered. "I nearly died, and now I'm paying for it, forever." Ura came over, wrapping her arms around him from behind. "We're alive," she whispered. "That's what matters." H covered her hands with his bra. "No, but I don't want this to happen to anyone else." So he started writing his next post, not about his own story, but about prevention, simple things, human things. If something on your body is growing, changing, or doesn't go away, get it looked at. A lump that doesn't hurt can still be serious. Don't trust online videos for medical procedures. Don't assume because something is just a cyst, it's safe to drain at home. Check your skin regularly. Go to free or low-cost clinics if you can. Push for annual checkups, even if it means budgeting for it. And then, perhaps most importantly, you are not weak for asking for help. You are not lazy for going to the doctor. You are not selfish for prioritizing your health." He ended the post with a message to men in particular. You're allowed to be scared, you're allowed to be unsure, but don't let pride or fear stop you from staying alive. Weeks turned to months. The wound closed completely by the 5th month. The skin remained discolored and sunken, but it was sealed. He was cleared for light activity. He walked longer distances. He did stretches. He even started lifting 5-pound weights under Laura's supervision. He was alive. He was healing, and he was no longer ashamed of the scar. One morning, he stood shirtless in front of the bathroom mirror. Laura came up behind him, her hand resting gently on his side. "You know," she said softly, "that scar used to scare me." Jack looked at her in the mirror. "Why?" "Because it reminded me how close I came to losing you." He nodded. "And now it reminds me how strong you are." He turned to her, pulled her close. "It reminds me how lucky I am." By the 6th month, Jack's inbox had become a constant stream of messages. Questions, thanks, photos, confessions. One woman wrote, "I found a lump behind my ear last year. After reading your story, I finally saw a dermatologist. It was a precancerous growth. They removed it. You might have saved my life." A father from Wisconsin messaged, "My teenage son had a cyst on his chest and was begging to pop it himself. I showed him your blog. We saw a doctor the next day. Thanks, man." Another simply said, "I'm 56, haven't seen a doctor in 12 years. I made an appointment this morning." Jack read each one slowly, often blinking back tears. Sometimes Laura would find him sitting silently at his desk, just staring at the screen. "This is more than a story," she said one night. "This is impact." One morning, a new email appeared in his inbox. The subject line read, "Your story at the National Surgical Conference?" It was from Dr. Monica Harris, a surgeon and medical educator based in Seattle. She had read about Jack's case on a professional medical forum and was stunned by the combination of medical emergency, patient psychology, and public education. "We'd like to feature your story," anonymized of course, as part of a panel on delayed care and its consequences in American healthcare. But then she added, "If you're comfortable, we'd love for you to participate in person, to give the patient perspective, to help our surgeons, nurses, and students see beyond the data." Jack sat with the email for a long time. His first instinct was to say no. Public speaking, in front of a room full of doctors, but Laura gently encouraged him. "You've been teaching thousands of strangers online. This is just doing it face to face." So he said yes. The weeks leading up to the conference were filled with preparation. Dr. Harris's team worked closely with Jack, helping shape his 10-minute segment. He would speak after Dr. Carter presented the clinical timeline of his case, photos, CT scans, the surgical process. Then Jack would come on stage and share the human side. He spent days writing his notes, rewriting, cutting, rewriting again. He wanted to get it right, not just for himself, but for the people still out there, still waiting, still afraid to call the doctor. The night before the event, Jack and Laura sat in their hotel room in Seattle. "I'm nervous," he admitted, tying his tie. "You're ready," she replied, squeezing his hand. "And you're not alone." The conference hall was massive, over 600 chairs, filled with physicians, surgeons, medical students, hospital administrators. A giant projection screen displayed the panel title, "When Waiting Hurts, Delayed Care, Emergency Outcomes, and the Real Cost of Avoidance." Dr. Carter took the stage first. She was calm, precise, and methodical. She described how Jack's cyst had grown over 3 years, the failed home drainage, the ruptured tissue, the bacterial invasion. She showed the CT images of the infected cavity, the extent of the necrotic tissue. A few people in the audience gasped at the size of the wound. Then she explained the debridement surgery and ICU admission. Jack Monroe's case is a textbook example, she said, of how delaying care can transform a simple outpatient procedure into a life-threatening systemic infection, requiring $180,000 in care and months of recovery. She paused, but more than that, it's a human story. One I'm honored we get to hear firsthand. When Jack took the stage, there was a brief silence. He stood at the podium in a simple blazer, the scar under his shirt a constant reminder of why he was there. He took a deep breath and began. 6 months ago, I was just a regular guy with a cyst on my back. I ignored it for 3 years. It didn't hurt. It seemed harmless. It grew to the size of a softball. I told myself I couldn't afford to deal with it. He looked up, scanning the audience. I was wrong. I nearly died. I went septic. I spent 2 weeks in the hospital, one of them in the ICU. I had emergency surgery. I couldn't walk for weeks. I couldn't work. I couldn't sleep without pain. I've been paying for it physically, emotionally, and financially ever since. He clicked to the next slide. A photo of his back with the cyst. A few gasps. Someone whispered, "Oh my God." Then the next slide, the wound post-surgery, raw and gaping. Jack paused. I know it's graphic. I'm showing you because it's real. Because this is what happens when someone delays care. Not because they're reckless, but because they're scared. Of judgment, of cost, of not being taken seriously. He shared the total bill, the out-of-pocket costs, the lingering debt. This all started because I didn't want to spend $200 on a doctor visit. I thought I was saving money. In the end, I nearly lost everything. He turned back to the crowd. You see charts, you read case studies, but behind every statistic is a person. Someone scared, someone trying to be tough, someone hoping it'll just go away. He took a breath. You have the power to change that, not just with scalpels, but with empathy, with listening, with making care more accessible, less intimidating. He paused, voice thick. I lived. But some people won't. Please help them get seen before it's too late. When he finished, the room was silent for a long moment. Then slowly the applause began, building, echoing, filling the space. Doctors stood, medical students wiped their eyes. A few came to the stage afterward, thanking him for reminding them what medicine is really about. You brought back the humanity, one resident said. You made me rethink how I talk to patients, said another. That evening, Jack and Laura walked along the Seattle waterfront. The sun was setting, casting gold across the water. I think I did okay, he said. Laura laughed. You were incredible. He looked out at the horizon, quiet for a moment. I used to think that scar was a punishment. A reminder of what I'd done wrong. He turned to her. Now I think it's a badge. Proof I made it out. Proof that I have something worth sharing. Back home, Jack's life continued to evolve. He began doing paid speaking events at medical schools and patient advocacy groups. He consulted with a nonprofit focused on affordable preventive care. He co-authored an article with Dr. Harris titled, The Patient Who Popped His Own Cyst, Lessons in Delayed Care and Medical Empathy. He wasn't trying to be famous. He was trying to be useful. His final post of the year went viral again. It was titled, If You're Afraid to Go to the Doctor, Read This. He told his story. He included resources, low-cost clinics, patient assistance programs, mental health support. He included a checklist, when to worry, when to act, how to ask questions without fear. He ended it with a photo of his back, scar and all. And beneath it, one sentence, this is what ignoring it looks like. Please don't wait. Months passed, and the seasons turned again. Summer arrived in Denver with its scorching afternoons and golden evenings. Jack's back had fully healed, at least physically. The scar remained, a sunken rectangle of puckered skin, a forever badge of the journey he'd survived. Some days Jack still stood shirtless before the mirror, tracing the edges of it with a strange reverence. It didn't disgust him anymore. It didn't fill him with shame. It reminded him of the line between life and death, of how close he'd come, of the miracle of modern medicine, and its terrible price. He was working again now, part-time at first, then full days, not back on the job site just yet, but in the office, training new recruits, reviewing blueprints, managing logistics. His body had limits, but his mind was sharp. And more than that, he'd discovered a new role in life, the voice of caution, reason, and sometimes, hope. His coworkers asked him questions about that time he went septic, about what it felt like to nearly die, about what he'd learned. Jack never sugarcoated it. But he always ended with a message. Don't be like me, he'd say. Get checked, get help. You're not invincible. One Saturday afternoon in late July, Jack received a letter in the mail. It was thick, official-looking. Laura handed it to him while sorting through bills. You got something from the hospital board, she said. Jack opened it cautiously, half expecting another invoice. But inside was something different, an invitation. Mr. Monroe, as part of our Community Health Initiative, we would like to invite you to speak at the State Health Policy Summit this fall. Your experience represents a vital intersection of personal responsibility, systemic barriers, and public education. We believe your voice could help influence policy toward more accessible preventive care. Sincerely, Dr. Elaine Carter, Chief Medical Officer. Jack read the letter twice. Laura was watching him closely. Well? She asked. He looked up, smiling softly. I guess they want the guy who popped his own cyst to speak to lawmakers now. The summit took place in October. Jack wore a simple suit and tie, his hair freshly trimmed, his notes tucked into a leather folder Laura had bought him years ago when he first became a foreman. He stood at the podium in a grand marble hall, facing a panel of state senators, public health officials, and insurance executives. He told his story, again, but this time with a new focus. I'm not just here to tell you about the cyst, he said. I'm here to tell you why I waited, why I didn't get help, why I thought doing nothing was safer than seeing a doctor. He paused, and the answer is this. I was scared, not of the lump, but of the system. He listed the costs, the copays, the high-deductible plan that didn't cover outpatient surgery until he'd met a $5,000 threshold. The fact that taking time off work could mean losing his job. I made a bad decision, he admitted, but I didn't make it in a vacuum. I made it in a country where being sick is expensive, where seeing a doctor feels like a gamble, where millions of people skip care every day because they just can't afford it. He looked at the officials. You want fewer people ending up in the ICU like me? Then make it easier for people to see a doctor when it's just a lump, not when it's an emergency. Silence. Then slow, thoughtful applause. After the summit, changes didn't happen overnight, but something shifted. Jack was invited to sit on a local health advisory board. He consulted with community clinics about outreach. He partnered with a mobile care unit to provide free screenings in construction zones, truck stops, and rural neighborhoods. Men don't show up for checkups, the lead nurse explained. They will if Jack's there, one of the volunteers replied. And still, the messages kept coming, from men in their 50s who'd ignored a lump, from mothers scared about a growth on their child's neck, from teenagers terrified to tell their parents something felt wrong. Jack replied to as many as he could. Sometimes all he said was, please see someone. Other times he sent resources, or links to low-cost clinics, or simply, you're not alone. One rainy evening, a letter arrived in a brown envelope with no return address. Jack opened it to find a handwritten note and a photo. The note read, I'm 38. I had a cyst on my leg for 4 years. After seeing your story, I finally went in. They removed it. It was early-stage cancer. They caught it in time. I'm going to live. Thank you. The photo was of a man with a healing wound on his thigh, smiling beside his daughter. Jack stared at the photo for a long time. Then he wept. Years later, when people talked about Jack Monroe, they didn't just talk about the guy who almost died popping a cyst. They talked about the man who turned his mistake into a mission. They talked about how his honesty helped change the way people thought about healthcare, about when to ask for help, about why people wait, about the cost of silence. Some people called him a patient advocate, others just called him brave. But Jack never thought of himself that way. I was just trying to survive, he'd say, and then he'd smile. But if my story helps someone else get help before it's too late, then maybe it was all worth it. One afternoon, Laura found him sitting quietly by the window again, staring out at the fall leaves swirling in the breeze. She sat beside him. Do you ever think about that day in the bathroom? She asked. He nodded. Every time I see the scar. Do you wish we'd done anything differently? Jack turned to her. Of course. But if we had, maybe we wouldn't be here. Maybe I wouldn't be who I am now. Laura leaned her head on his shoulder. I'm glad you're here. He kissed the top of her head. So am I. That night, Jack added one last line to his blog. A mistake almost killed me. But the story I lived through is saving others. So if you're reading this and you're scared, go get checked. You're not weak, you're human. And you deserve to stay alive.